Armenia and Azerbaijan, a topic I'm very well versed in. No, this is I think something that's important to discuss because it's sort of the latest humanitarian world crisis going on um between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Pretty much from what we can tell from this like brief NPR explainer here, fighting has flared up between Armenia and Azerbaijan, two former Soviet republics and traditional adversaries sandwiched between Russia and Georgia in the Middle East in a region known as the South Caucasus. The two bordering countries are bitter rivals that have been clashing over territorial claims since the late 1980s, with periodic bouts of violence occasionally interrupting into outright war. But hostilities began anew between Armenia and Azerbaijan this month when, in the deadliest spate of violence since 2020, with at least 100 people killed, officials said. A ceasefire reached Wednesday put a temporary stop to the bloodshed. And this is largely happening in an area called Nagorno-Karabakh, which is an ethnically Armenian enclave located inside of Azerbaijan. Even though Armenia claims the territory, the area is internationally recognized as Azerbaijan. And a war in the 1990s there killed 30,000 people and displaced 1 million, resulted in Armenia gaining control of Nagorno-Karabakh and several surrounding districts. They're basically arguing that they have a right to it because there are more ethnic Armenians there and that Azerbaijan has an interest in, attacking their people. And so it almost reeks of the justifications that Russia used to invade Ukraine. Like, oh, we have Ukrainians who are in, we have Russians who are in Ukraine who are being terrorized by Ukraine, or at least that's the official, like, Vladimir Putin story. And so this justifies our invasion. But to my understanding, in this case, as it says here, fortunes flipped in 2020 when the two countries went to war again. This time, Azerbaijan, aided by its military ally Turkey, more on that in a moment, retook large portions of Nagorno-Karabakh and its nearby territories, according to Crisis Group. A dead end to the hostilities was later brokered by Russia, which sent a peacekeeping force to patrol the rest of Nagorno-Karabakh, even though it's still governed by local pro-Armenian forces. But I feel like basically what started this like most recent fighting, like to my understanding, is that Azerbaijan attacked first, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so the article mentioned that this has been an on again, off again relationship between the two countries for a long time. Really has been. Like the whole region is kind of an interesting region. It's in an interesting spot geographically, right? So it's right by the Caspian Sea. Russia comes, yeah, you can see on that. Yeah, okay, there you go. You can see it on that map. Russia comes all the way down there. Like it's practically the Middle East at some point. It's not that far. I think people tend to forget just how big Russia is and how far it comes down into these different
Yeah, like
regions,
Russia
right?
is Asia and Europe, because and
Yeah.
it's the Middle East. It's
Yeah, it
huge.
really is. And it's crazy. And even within those nations, like, or the nations that are not Russia, they still have very strong ties to those regions, like all the Stan countries, like Russia has a very strong influence there, and a lot of them are former Soviet states.
Like,
But
sorry, but like, yo, this is Russia. Like,
it's
on
crazy.
its
Yeah.
east is
Oh my
Japan,
God.
on its west is Finland. Do you know the distance between Finland and Japan?
What do
Like,
they say? It's like 1/6 of the entire planet, or I don't remember, something like that.
yeah, like it is. Yeah, like Canada
Maybe
and
it is. Yeah.
yeah,
Jeez.
like
Yeah.
Canada is like really large, but like Canada's
It
maybe the
looks like
closest
nothing
thing.
compared to Russia.
Yeah, you can fit like North America maybe tilted on its side. I don't know for a fact. It just looks true.
Russia is like kind of fascinating to me, probably because it's so big. Because it's almost like, the czars, that was kind of their thing, was every czar had to just like build more of Russia, right? And just keep conquering lands. And if you were a bad czar if you didn't conquer lands, and they say that that's part of why Putin is doing what he's doing, because he's trying to, bring that kind of czar essence back to Russian rule. But when you think about like how big it is, it's crazy because all that land, those were people, those were civilizations, those were ethnic groups and cultures and things like that. And then it's like it all just got painted over by a big Russian brush. You can argue that with the United States too, I guess, but Russia, it's like you just don't know anything about the people who live in these spots, because they're all just Russian now. which seems kind of sad.
And,
But
and it gets complicated because I've talked to a lot of my Armenian friends, especially the ones who are very politically aware about these things, and there's a
mhm.
lot of mixed cultural feelings amongst Armenians about their relationship to Russia because the former Soviet state, and there's mixed feelings. Like they see Russia, especially like my younger friends who tend to be like more left of center on these things. Um,
Hmm.
they dislike Russian imperialism and Russian aggression in like that regard, but they do like they the fact that there's a power that stands up against American imperialism. They do like that there's a power that helps
Yeah.
to back up Armenia when we said see later Turkey. Like Turkey is a massive like enemy to Armenia. They of course perpetuated the Armenian genocide more than 100 years ago, and still the official state guidance on that is to deny the existence of that genocide or the presence that it ever happened. And so that relationship makes relations between Armenia and Russia a little bit stronger existentially for that reason, especially when you see
Yeah.
countries like Azerbaijan here. Russia ends up being the mediator a lot of the time.
Russia did sell weapons to Azerbaijan. So Russia
It's
kind of is like
complicated.
trying to play both sides a little bit. And their really Russia's relationship with Turkey is also very complicated. So like all of these things, and if you look on the map, yeah, Turkey's right there bordering both Armenia and Azerbaijan. And that's a big, big issue too. But so basically, if you look on the map, this map is so crazy to me. So Armenia is bordered on two sides by Azerbaijan for like no reason that anyone really knows, except that maybe Stalin just felt like giving it to Azerbaijan. Like it was supposed to be to Armenia, that little, it's called Nachivan, that little, yep, right there. That part was just supposed to go to Armenia because geographically that makes sense. But then Stalin was like, no, give it to Azerbaijan. So that's kind of weird. And then the Nagorno-Karabakh region, that one, as you said, is geographically in Azerbaijan, but it's occupied by Armenians. And so they would like to just go to Armenia and be part of Armenia. And Azerbaijan doesn't want that to happen. So there's a lot going on over there. And there's also, I mean, the relationship between these two countries, because there's of where they're located geographically, they're kind of in between a lot of different things, like east and west, north and south. They're like kind of in the Middle East, kind of not. But then back in, if you go very, very far back into history, they were part of all kinds of different empires too, right? So like they were ruled by the Ottomans and the Russian Empire and the Turkish empires and all these different things. And in Armenia, Armenian people are their own ethnic group entirely, right? And so they're not Persians, they're not like Turkish, they're not anything. They're just Armenians, right? And the Azeri people, they tend to be ethnically Turkish. So the Turkey tends to support Azerbaijan in their efforts, and it's all a big problem because Armenia now is kind of like surrounded by hostile energy. So just hostile forces trying to infringe on them. And in the past, historically, that has not worked out very well for them. It's been really, really bad for the Armenian people. That's not to say that the Azeri people haven't also suffered in their own way in a lot of different ways, but I think the whole thing comes back to that Armenian genocide and the fact that Turkey was still kind of denying it. I think they're like they came around a little bit, but not like didn't like a few years ago. Oh no no no! I'm thinking the United States finally recognized it
That's
in
correct. Yeah.
2019. That's what it was. In 2019, it took since the 2019 up until just a few years ago, the United States finally acknowledged that there was an Armenian genocide at the hands of Turkey. And the reason why they probably didn't do that before is because Turkey didn't acknowledge it. For they have like all kinds of crazy reasons for not acknowledging what they did in Armenia and to the
I,
Armenian people.
I mean, the largest reason is if they acknowledge it, they would have to face accountability for it much
Yeah,
faster
yeah,
than like being tried for it. And like the United States stays mum on it because the United States sees Turkey as its largest military ally in the Middle East, next to Israel perhaps. And so
they
in
didn't want to upset Turkey and
exactly.
say anything. Yeah. And I mean that genocide was so bad that people say that and because this is important, it was so bad and Turkey essentially got away with it and they say that that is what inspired the Nazis to do what they did to the Jews because they said, well, Turkey did it and they got away with it. It's totally fine. They don't have to worry about it. And
The
so then they're
original
like,
they let you do it.
yeah. Yeah, they get away with it. So, I mean, it's all pretty crazy. But some of the reasons that they came up with for, not acknowledging, they said, well, that was the Ottomans who did it. That wasn't us. And it's like you can't just change the name of who you are and then be like, that wasn't us. But it was still you. It was the same people. You just changed your name. You were once the Ottomans, now you're the Turks. Same people. And then another funny one was that they said, well, it wasn't genocide because there was no word for genocide back then. Like the term genocide was not a thing back then. So that couldn't have been what it was, which just makes no sense. It's just semantics, which is like such a ridiculous. I'm laughing, but it's ridiculous. It's such a dumb thing to just not acknowledge what happened. And it was brutal. Like I mean, obviously they killed a lot of Armenians, but they also displaced them and, kind of forced them off their land. Sometimes they would like fill up boatloads of Armenians and just dump them in the sea. They would just take them out to the sea and just let them go and kill them that way. And then a lot of the Armenians that stayed behind or were left behind or left alive, they were displaced from their homes. Their homes were taken from them and the Turks would come in and just take their property and things like that. Some of them were forced to marry Turkish people and have their children. And another component to this is the religion, right? Armenians are Christian, the Turkish were largely Muslim. So there was all that. So they were forcing Christian women to marry and have children with Muslim men, which is obviously a big problem. So
It's
yeah,
it's
there's a
it's
lot of
eth-
layers to this.
it's ethnic and cultural genocide because you're trying to erase the culture of one
Yeah.
people and make it your own. It wasn't like they're trying to make, oh no, we have these wonderful blended families. No, they're trying to impose Islam
Yeah.
onto a people. So like that's an additional aspect of genocide. So it's interesting because Russia, the usual mediator, Putin has said some words saying that like we hope that Afghanistan, not Afghanistan, Armenia and Azerbaijan maintain peace together, but Putin's a little busy, as you know. His military's a little bit tapped, as we've heard, and so there isn't a lot of support that Russia is able to provide either side at this point. Nancy Pelosi called out Azerbaijan for starting the conflict. Azerbaijan said it was just Armenian propaganda and that threatened to restart the conflict because they're currently at a ceasefire at the time of recording. But world leaders are really just at a point right now where they're like, listen, we really want to settle this down. Again, Azerbaijan is a major exporter of oil to Europe, and Europe is in a little bit of a crisis right now, sea above
And
Russia.
Armenia is not. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is in a lot of nakedly um like zero sum political interests for a lot of political figures in Europe, in the Middle East, in the United States, and around the world to want this to end as soon as possible. I think from a human rights perspective, we should want this to end as soon as possible. There were like yeah, it was 105 service members killed and 6 civilians wounded on the Armenian side, and Azerbaijan said 2 civilians hurt, 71 service members died. So a lot of bloodshed. This fighting is starting to get closer to the border of both countries. So not just in Nagorno-Karabakh, where it's you don't want war anywhere, but it's like been constantly under battle for a number of years, especially flare-ups in 2020. Now it's happening towards places that haven't seen conflict as recently near the border of both places. So that could get much more deadly if we don't kind of keep our eyes on this, keep knowledge of this, and when the time comes, hopefully the time doesn't have to come, but if necessary, pressure our politicians to make sure they are vocal about this kind of thing, because this is like one of those world issue politics things that they have a lot of say on, as America is a dying empire in this whole like world police scenario.
Well, I mean, so as we talked about, this conflict goes back so many years, centuries, decades, whatever, and it's not going to go away if you just will it to go away because the issues have never been addressed, right? So the Turkish people, the Azeri people are ethnic Turks, a lot of them. So Turkey supports them. Turkey doesn't acknowledge the genocide of Armenia, and a lot of the Azeris were involved in that genocide. They don't admit to it. They've never atoned for it. It's not. It's never going to heal. The whole situation is not going to just go away one day. And we see this all over the world in all kinds of different conflicts that people are just at war with each other. There is no solution to be found, right? Like you're not going to The only solution to be found is everyone just gives up and stops fighting each other and we can all just move on with our lives, but they're never going to do that, right? No side is going to just give up and surrender and say whatever, like I just don't care anymore, because these issues go back centuries, right? People have lost their lives, their homes because of all kinds of different conflicts around the world. Even here in the United States, like we don't talk about what we did to the Native Americans. That's still a problem that we're dealing with. We don't talk about what we did in Central America. That's still a problem that we're dealing with. And it doesn't just go away. None of these things ever go away. And the other thing that I'll say is that it was a point that you were making earlier about how you were talking about your Armenian friends, how they view Russia, right? And how it's different from how we view Russia as American born citizens, right? And whenever I look at any of these international conflicts, what you see is that functionally Russia and the United States are the same thing, right?
Yes.
We are in one of those two nations. So we as Americans have a very, like, generally overall as Americans we have a very biased view of Russia, but it's a mirror, right? We're two sides of a coin, and functionally the way that we interact with countries around the world, it's the same, right? We just happen to be in one of those two nations, but around the world, especially in Europe and nations that are closer to Russia, they don't necessarily see Russia or the United States as any different from one another functionally, in terms of, we support Saudi Arabia, Russia supports Iran, Russia is playing peacekeeper in Azerbaijan, and we don't really think about that, but we do similar things in the Middle East too. Like we have occupations in Iraq and we had occupations in Afghanistan where we were doing peacekeeping operations. We're going to step in and help you guys because you need help, and we're the superpower to do that. And a lot of times over here, we can't understand why certain countries would be loyal to, like the West, to NATO or whoever, and then maybe switch over and, sidle up with Russia instead because Russia is offering them help, right? It doesn't matter. Whoever's offering these countries the help that they need, then they'll align with. They don't see it as like as big of an issue in that sense. And I'm generalizing here, of course, but it is interesting to kind of see Russia, if you just think of Russia as just another version of the United States, just on the other side of things, it all kind of starts to make a little bit more sense about how they operate on the world stage.
Yeah, and
Does
I
that make sense?
no totally. I hear this argument used a lot by like tankies, so to speak, or people who do like they are people who claim to be on the left, but not like a lot of people who are like left wingers but accidentally conservative. They're left wingers who say we are pro Russian imperialism and we're pro Chinese imperialism because it's anti American imperialism. And I'm like, no,
Interesting.
I'm anti imperialist. I don't like when the US does it. I don't like when Russia does it. I don't like when China does it. And so,
What a
like,
weird take. Yeah.
no, yeah. And so that's, but the point you just made is usually a point they make, which is that, like, listen, all of the stuff you're talking about with, like, oh, Russia, this imperial power, they're just making up reasons and justifications for invading other countries. This you, America? Like, America's done the same thing multiple times over. That's not to be a justification for what Russia's doing. And where I veer off from those leftists is to say, 2, 3, 4, 9 wrongs don't make a right here. We don't want to encourage Russia for doing this behavior, but yeah, we should also be level-headed and go, this is behavior that the United States does as well, so we can't take the United States at face value when they say that we don't like it when countries do this sort of thing, or we're standing on the world stage to say that you just can't invade another country's sovereign territory. It's not for that reason. Like let's just be flat and blunt. Like it's not, America thrives off of that, so it can't be that for that reason. But that doesn't then say I'm now pro Putin. I'm now pro Xi Jinping. I hate all imperialists on God. Fuck them all.
Oh God. Well, so I just did a story recently about how the White House is trying to call attention on the world stage that Russia is interfering in international elections and they shouldn't be, and they're funneling money into all these elections and they're interfering over here. And it's like we got to stop them. It's like we do the same thing. We do the same thing. Like how are you going to just like be like, I don't like when they do it though. It's a hard argument to make because we literally do the exact same thing. And now the White House is trying to like make a thing out of Russia doing it, but same thing. I mean, I'm not saying that either of us should be doing that. I'm just saying the United States, if you're going to call it bad when they do it, also acknowledge that you are also doing the same thing.